Wonder Woman took cinemas by storm when it released in 2017. So with the same creative team returning for a sequel, and the ever-popular decade of the 80s being its setting, this felt like it could outdo the first in every possible way. But with expectations comes disappointment, as the film released during COVID caused quite a stir for its creative partners, and had some rather questionable CGI. So today on DC Revisited, we're getting into it all as we dive into Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 1984.
Make a wish. Any wish. Look into my eyes and everything you've been waiting for, it's all yours.
After the first film made $822 million worldwide, a sequel was announced just 1 month after release. And a few months later, it was also announced that writer-director Patty Jenkins, as well as her co-writer Jeff Johns, would return and serve as the same roles for this new adventure. Not exactly a surprise, given that Johns was still head of DC at the time. Johns mostly had the story outlined, and they further outlined it on a massive 20-foot whiteboard. Jenkins' main concern was emotion and making sure the audience was properly engaged with the fantastical elements that they were introducing. Dave Callaham was also brought on as a screenwriter. Zack Snyder and his wife Deborah Snyder would also return as producers. So with much of the same creative team back, and considering the success of the first outing, expectations started quite high. Gal Gadot of course returned to her role as Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman. But Gadot found herself with a bit more power this time around, both on screen and off, as she served as a producer here. Which is probably also why she saw her salary increase from $300,000 to a massive $10 million. Wowza, what a payday. But Gal wouldn't be the only person playing the role of Diana. With Lily Aspo playing a younger version like she did in the first film, she appears in an extended opening sequence and actually does the majority of her stunts. Diving more into Wonder Woman's rogues gallery, Jenkins didn't want to just have someone that was the embodiment of evil, and instead wanted the creation of several villains. First, they looked at the Duke of Deception, but decided against him, wanting to avoid another god after Ares was the villain in the first. But they still made sure to reference the character. In this film, he's the creator of the Dreamstone, which the writers saw as a great MacGuffin that would set in motion the events of the entire story.
I never looked like this. Not even close. It took me a long time to get ready.
Having been a big enemy of Diana's for decades, Cheetah was chosen as one of the villains of the film. There have been several iterations of the character in the comics, so Barbara Minerva was picked due to her backstory of being more of a friend of Diana's before becoming one of her mortal enemies. We don't really get that here outside of some brief interactions, but they do seem to be on decent terms with each other. Barb would receive her powers from the Dreamstone. The studio wanted Emma Stone, but thankfully Patty Jenkins got her first choice of Kristen Wiig, who accepted the role before even knowing what it was, simply being a fan of the first Wonder Woman. Very different from what she usually plays, the role gives Wiig a ton of action and makes her a formidable foe for Diana. But in typical sequel fashion, one big bad just wasn't enough. So Maxwell Lorenzano, aka Max Lord, was decided upon. Having become Hollywood's It Man, Pedro Pascal was cast in the role. Pascal is ridiculously charismatic, and unlike his comic book counterpart, the character has no superpowers. Instead, Lord absorbs the power of the Dreamstone, which allows him to grant someone else's desire. But he can take whatever he wants from the Wisher. Pascal plays the role in an unexpected way, feeling like a bit of a dork.
He's not cool. And I was like, oh, perfect. That's so much better for me.
Plenty of actors returned from the first film, but there's one that surprised most when the cast was announced. Chris Pine as Steve Trevor. If you'll remember, Steve died in a beautiful sacrifice that is still referred to even in current day.
Steve Trevor tell you that?
Despite speculation that fan demand brought him back, according to Jenkins, this was always part of the plan. So how is he somehow alive in a film that takes place almost 40 years ago? Well, it turns out that due to the Dream Stone, it's just his soul possessing another man. So while we see Chris Pine, it's really this guy, Christopher Polaha. We'll just ignore all that it implies.
Because of the implication.
Robin Wright would return in a flashback as Antiope, and Connie Nielsen would return as Queen Hippolyta. But that's just about all she wrote for returns. With this film taking place so long after the original, many of the human characters are either dead or in a retirement home. And any fan of the original Wonder Woman TV show is sure to recognize Linda Carter appearing in the closing credits as the Amazon warrior Asteria. It's a nice treat for fans. The story of Wonder Woman 1984 follows Diana Prince as she's trying to stay under the radar. At least that's what we're told, because she seems to do a lot of stuff in the public eye. But when a mysterious gem called the Dream Stone starts granting wishes of those who possess it, the world is flung into chaos. And guess who has to save it? Filming started in the United States in June of 2018 under the covert title Magic Hour. Alexandria, Virginia was the home to the Landmark Mall, which would serve as a big set piece at the beginning of the film. But while in the area, they also filmed in front of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Production would then move to Europe in August and jump from country to country. They would start in England, then move to Spain in September, then spend the remainder of production back in England. Production designer Aline Bonetta really took advantage of the neon aesthetic of the 80s and provided a layered world. She also recreated several parts of the White House and the Smithsonian down to the tiniest detail. Even the massive compound was practically built. It's a shame that most of the movie has this CGI film over it that takes away from so many of the practical sets. Costume designer Lindy Hemming returned and based most of Diana's wardrobe on 1980s Brooke Shields. For the Wonder Woman costume itself, they went with more classic colors, but retained much of the same design. The gold armor that Diana wears during the finale is actually based on the costume that she wears in Alex Ross's Kingdom Come, although Ross himself was upset to not be compensated for his design being used in something other than a comic. Can't please everyone. Given that this iteration of Wonder Woman can essentially fly, there hasn't been much need for the invisible jet, but that would change in this film, as we would finally see the first appearance of the famous invisible plane. In this version, Diana simply turns the plane invisible herself, and we're saved from any silly boxy look from the outside. And being the progressive production that it was, and in the wake of all the Me Too allegations, this was the first film to agree to the Producers Guild guidelines about how to deal with sexual harassment on the set. A nice step forward, and something I hope they didn't have to utilize. At one time, Hans Zimmer had retired from doing superhero films, but Snyder has always managed to bring him back into the fold. While Zimmer hadn't scored the prior film, he did score Wonder Woman's theme from Batman v Superman, which became one of her signature music pieces. So Zimmer took on scoring duties, and he provides much of the same flair.
And everything has a price, one I'm not willing to pay. Not anymore.
Wonder Woman 1984 released in the United States on Christmas Day 2020 and made, well, that's where things get complicated. Everyone remembers that little thing called COVID, right? Turned the world upside down. Well, this film was originally intended to premiere in December of 2019, but was delayed to June 5th, 2020. But when the theater shut down on March 24th, it was given the Christmas release date, and Warner was adamant about it sticking to that date. But that's not where the drama ends. With the uncertainty of COVID, Warner Bros. Decided that all of their 2021 releases would release on the same day and date in theaters and on HBO Max. So Wonder Woman 1984 was officially the first film to take part in the program, something that was much maligned by industry greats like Christopher Nolan. Wonder Woman 1984 would end its run in the US at just $46.8 million, with the worldwide total coming in at $169.6 million. And given how skeezy streamers have been about their numbers, it's a mystery as to how much HBO Max was able to contribute. Given the film's production budget of $200 million, this was rough any way you cut it. But don't feel bad for Patty Jenkins or Gal Gadot, they still received their intended bonuses, so there was no lawsuit necessary. One of the most interesting things to note when it comes to Wonder Woman 1984 is how much creative freedom was given to the filmmakers. Many times we complain about studio interference and how much it made the movie worse, but that's not the culprit here. Jenkins' success with the first film meant that she was given carte blanche, and the end result is absolutely one of the worst DC movies out there. With brutal CGI, a poorly concocted plot, and villains that disappear from memory as soon as the credits roll, very few aspects of this film work. At least it seems as though the filmmakers were prepared for this.
It is so daunting to bring Cheetah to the screen. You know how wrong it could go.
And this was evidenced by the reaction. Due to Wonder Woman 1984's failure, on top of all the other disappointments through DC, we would see Wonder Woman 3 promptly announced and then cancelled. Due to the James Gunn, Peter Safran DC universe taking over from Superman Legacy on, we will likely be seeing a new Wonder Woman when that happens. And with Sean Gunn already cast in the new Maxwell Lord role, that should open up Pedro Pascal for a litany of other comic book roles. Let's get going. But as we get away from the techno-fueled 80s, we're going back under the sea and taking a look at the final film in the Snyder timeline. Oh, that's right, we're getting into it fast. But that's a story for next time. Join us, same movie time, same movie channel.